Oh, wait, the first honest thing we've heard. Because, again, that's what Genesis says. First there was nothing, and then stuff happened. What is this guy even talking about?
He's just talking out of his
butt.
last name.
He's just trying to shoehorn a deity in there, like, two hands on that shoehorn. Like, how do you even respond to this much garbage happening this fast?
I don't know, therefore God.
Yeah, that's it. But the universe is pure effing chaos. It does not look designed at all.
Or when you go to get your groceries, you drive a crunk car to get them, right? If you had never before seen a kingfisher and never before seen a bullet train, would you know which one of those is from nature and which one of them is synthetic?
Show me any animal that can see with the acuity of the Hubble telescope, and then get back to me about how we can't build anything better than what we find in nature.
Hello, Internet. This is Red Angel Sophia here, and I have my guest here, LoudLoudLeftie. How are you doing, LoudLoudLeftie?
Doing great. Eager to get into this because it's going to be fun.
Yes. Today we are going to be critiquing a video by someone named Kyle Butts. Do you think we have to beep that last name out if it's someone's last name?
It's. I mean, this is all being done under fair use, so I would assume that it's all fair game.
No, what I mean is the fact that his name might be in itself a bad word.
Yeah, you could just you can, if his name appears on the video anyway, you can just say an apologist, and they can read his name off the title of the video.
Yeah, but anyways, we're debunking a video by Mr. Butt where he thinks that he has proof that 6 proofs that there is 6 proofs that Allah exists,
or Zeus, or whatever. I'm assuming he means the Christian version, but
oh yeah, he just says that God exists, so that title kind of leaves it up to our imagination which God he's referring to.
Hey, I saw the Avengers. I know which one we're talking
about. So it's Thor exists?
Yes, I have seen lightning, therefore Thor.
Yeah, the point is he no doubt is referring to the Christian God, but the point is that the arguments that he has, spoiler alert, they could be retooled for just about any God he can think of. But we'll let you know if we find anyone that any argument in there that would be any more applicable to his God than to Allah.
Doubtful, but you never know.
And also we'll let you know if his video somehow gets to us and we become born-again Christians because of it. We'll let you know. Spoiler alert, not likely. But hey, we're skeptics. We have open minds.
We'll go through it. We're going to watch it,
yeah, and if he actually, in the off chance that he says something that's actually persuasive, in that highly unlikely off chance, it is our commitment as skeptics to be open about that.
True.
So, without any further ado, here is Mr. Butt's video.
Socrates once stated that we should follow the argument wherever it leads. When we look at the most profound question of life, does God exist? We should certainly follow his advice. When we do, we'll find evidences that show us God is real. Let's look at.
Hold on.
Okay, a spinning globe with the word evidence appearing on it several times.
That's
gotta
extremely
be good.
scientific right there. So this guy starts with making bald claims that have no foundation. The first one being basically the first words out of his mouth, that the most profound question of all is does God exist? Which is not the most profound question of all, for the same reason that does Superman exist is not the most profound question of all. We're talking about him, saying, oh, this is profound about a character that, as far as we can tell, is fictional. On an individual basis, something like, should I get married, is probably a lot more profound than does character from Scripture X exist. So he starts off pretty weak there. And I'm not impressed with the opening, but maybe it gets better. What do you think?
Well, if he could prove that his God existed, it would have some effects on me. It would. I don't know whether I would actually want to worship such a monstrous God.
That's a different question, though. Does it exist, and is it an a-hole? Not the same question. Not mutually exclusive either,
Yeah.
By the way, that smarmy look on his face. Anyway, let's continue. What else does this guy have to say?
Okay, let's see here.
6 proofs that show God exists. Number 1, the universe must have a cause. The most fundamental law of science.
Let's dig into that for a second.
Yeah, I want to see what the most fundamental law of all science is.
Continue a minute, and then I want to address that point.
A cause. The most fundamental law of science is the law of cause and effect. And it says that for every material effect we see, there is a cause that came before it or was simultaneous to it, and that is greater than it.
Oh, my flying spaghetti monster.
No, time out. No. Okay, so there's the law of cause and effect literally says for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, exactly as Sir Isaac Newton said. It literally cannot come before it in conventional physics. It has to happen simultaneously. Okay? That's why, when these two hands knock together, the fist impact here happens in both directions at the same time. I don't hit this way and then this one goes flying off, and then a few seconds later, that's not the way reality works. Now, interestingly, as we gain more knowledge of quantum mechanics, it's actually possible for causes to happen after the effect when you talk about stuff at the quantum level. But there is no requirement that causes have to happen before it, and it is literally impossible for a cause to be greater than the effect because, again, equal and opposite reaction. If the cause gets stronger, the effect gets stronger. You can't have them out of balance. That's not the way the universe works.
Then
so this guy is already not very scientifically accurate.
Yeah, or he could be referring to something, to a presumption in science called natural causality. But natural causality also, which is basic, but natural causality also says nothing about the cause having to be greater than the effect.
And again, physics tells us it literally is impossible for a cause to be greater than an effect. It must be equal. There's no avoiding it.
I'm not talking about the action and the reaction. I'm talking about motion machines. I'm talking about natural causality.
Yes, I'm just saying that in the way this person's talking about it, since I'm assuming that what we're looking at on the screen there is some kind of image of the Big Bang, that he's talking about physics. That, he's using fancy words, but the picture on the screen is definitely he's going to talk about the Big Bang.
I'm saying to steelman him. I'm assuming he's referring to the natural causality, but that's just to steelman him.
fair, but I would bet real money we're going to hear Big Bang Theory out of this guy in the next 2 minutes.
Quite possibly.
Right. Let's see what we get.
Of course, that would be insider betting because this is not a react as we see them. This is not
a first time viewing. So
this is not a first.
We
That's
have
not
a
the kind
little
of
bit. Well, let's say we have a little omniscience.
Yeah, there are some people who do shows where they review a video as they watch it for the first time, but this is not that kind of show.
But you know it's
yeah.
The universe is a material effect. So what caused the universe?
What do you mean a
You see,
material
if
effect?
you don't believe
What?
He's saying the universe is a material effect. It's matter and energy, and it's not an effect. It's not like somebody took a tennis ball universe and that's not the way this works. But okay, my head's going to explode here. But let's go.
in a creator, then you have to suggest something like a singularity. That's what is popular creator. Then you have to suggest.
Oh my God, I resent this guy.
Yes.
You don't
The
have to posit anything
material
because you don't
effect.
believe
So
in a
what
God.
caused-
Atheism is just the lack of belief in something. Saying you have to believe because of that is like saying you have to believe something because you don't believe in Santa Claus. Like not believing in Santa Claus doesn't mean you have a certain theory of cosmology. It's just not believing in a God or gods. That's it. It doesn't mandate that we think anything else.
And also if we don't accept their explanation that the universe was created by some god, and they ask them where does the universe come from, one thing I like Matt Dillahunty's standard answer: I don't know, and neither do you.
He also has another answer for this when someone posits it's God. He says, how do you know it isn't universe farting pixies? Which, colorful, but I mean, there's really nothing that I've heard so far that would negate the possibility of universe farting pixies.
Oh, and when did he come up with that one? Did he come up
years
with that
ago?
one?
Years ago. That's probably a decade old.
Then
I
must
think he
have beat
probably
me
goes
to
with
it.
the I don't know and neither do you answer now, but the one he used to use was universe farting pixies.
Yeah. Okay.
The universe. You see, if you don't believe in a creator, then you have to suggest something like a singularity. That's what is popular today, that there was some type of singularity that exploded in something called the Big Bang. But then when you try to get down to the bottom of what's a singularity.
Okay, good thing I didn't take your bet because I would have lost something.
Okay, so again, atheism does not dictate you have to subscribe to the Big Bang Theory. Also, the Big Bang Theory does not say that a singularity exploded. It says it expanded. So we're already seeing this person is not actually conversant with the material they're talking about.
Oh, of course. You think that science is Mr. Butt's forte? This is the guy who made a video that I debunked on this channel, not on this show, but on this channel some time ago, about 6 reasons not to believe in evolution.
Oh boy. Well, you know what else is his
like
forte? Hairstyle is not his forte either. His haircut looks straight out of the Republican acceptable haircut package. Yeah.
I think his forte is acting in a manner that's in keeping with his last name.
Probably, yeah. All right, let's see. What else we got here?
Of what's a singularity? Well, what we hear from the scientific community that suggests to us, the cosmologists, they say, well, a singularity was something that popped into existence from nothing.
No. A singularity is everything compressed into a point space. It is not nothing. You know who actually says everything came from nothing? Him. The first part of the Bible. In the beginning, there was nothing, and then stuff. That's his. side of it, not mine, not science's.
From a geometric standpoint, in geometry, a singularity simply means a single point, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's
but I mean,
all.
since he's talking about the Big Bang, that singularity contained all the matter and energy in the cosmos, and then it expanded.
In the universe.
Yeah.
In the universe.
Yeah. But it's not nothing. You know, that's not what science says. To all you watchers, that's not what science says. No.
Anyways, before we go on, I would like to mention something that I completely forgot to mention at the beginning of this video, and that is that, by the way, people like this, their crazy views are not inconsequential. They get a lot of political power, and they create theological laws, and these theological laws can make the lives of certain marginalized groups of people much worse. And frankly, in the southeastern United States, i.e. the Bible Belt, there's it's a place that is downright dangerous for transgender people because of these Christian dominionists who are in power. And there's somebody who's trying to escape from the South that I would like to do what I can to help. It's a disabled transgender person. Alfred needs help escaping from the South, and so I'm going to put in the video description area of this video a link to his GoFundMe page so that you can help Alfred get out of the South, because that place is dangerous for transgender people, and he's also disabled. He needs all the help he can get. So I'll be putting a link to his GoFundMe page in the video description area, and I think I might even be able to put on screen here for a few moments a QR code, if I get the QR code generator working properly. I'll put a link here to the QR code so you can go to the GoFundMe page, and if you have any spare money, help Alfred get out of the South, because you could be saving his life. Anyways, back to the show.
Back to the anti-science guy here.
Yeah. Anyways, so let's go on.
Yep.
Thing. Do you know that if there ever were a time when there was nothing, that's exactly what we would have now? The idea that something popped into existence from nothing is simply not a scientific idea.
Oh, wait, the first honest thing we've heard. Because, again, that's what Genesis says. First there was nothing, and then stuff happened, okay? So, by his own admission, if there was nothing, there should still be nothing. But as soon as you look around you, or, take a spoonful of cereal or whatnot, you understand there is stuff. So, no, there was nothing, and then there was something. Science says the stuff was already there, just in a very, very, very small space, and then expanded outward. Genesis says
before
nothing,
that,
and then poof.
And as for before that, what was there before that? As Matt Dillahunty says, it could be like asking what's north of the North Pole.
Yeah. So just to touch on that from a physics perspective, at the moment, we have no way of investigating anything before the first instance of Planck time, which is the smallest measurable unit of time we know of after the instant when the singularity began to expand. This is what the Big Bang Theory says. So there's no way to look back past that. And as far as we can tell, before the Big Bang happened, concepts like time were meaningless. So there is no before that. It's just time does not work that way. If you want to understand more about it, you would have to study a lot of physics. But the short version is before Big Bang equals no such thing as time.
You see, they're suggesting that that singularity is somehow natural, but it behaves supernaturally. They say that that singularity wouldn't have followed.
What is this guy even talking about?
He's just talking out of his last name.
In his case, this would literally be his butthole. Yeah. So what? Supernatural. He's just trying to shoehorn a deity in there, like, you know, two hands on that shoehorn. Just no. Like, how do you even respond to this much garbage happening this fast? So no, the natural phenomena of the universe do not require a supernatural, a motivator to make them happen.
Yeah. Ready to go on?
Oh yeah.
Suggesting that that singularity is somehow natural, but it behaves supernaturally. They said that that singularity wouldn't have followed the laws of nature. Well, then, so what are we left with?
Oh, yeah. I don't know, therefore God.
Yeah, that's it. So what Sophia is talking about now is something called the God of the Gaps logical fallacy, where basically anything you don't know, you grab a crowbar and you pry God in there, and you just attribute it to God without any rhyme, reason, evidence, facts, foundation, none of it. Doesn't matter. Just going to say it was God and have done with it. And that is not just intellectually dishonest, but intellectually lazy. Because if all of humanity just assumed that, we wouldn't know how to make fire. Somebody who said, oh, well, fire happens when lightning strike, therefore God. So we're not even going to try to figure out if we can rub two sticks together really fast and, cook this meat so we don't all die of, whatever foodborne illnesses.
No, we don't die because of God.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
it's not bacteria, it's God. Yeah. Wow. There's like, you have to pause this like every sentence or so to react to the crazy. It's unreal.
We're left with the fact that the universe had a beginning and it was not a natural cause. It was something above.
What?
We're left with the fact, he says. So here's the other thing that he's delving into is the Kalam cosmological argument. Everything had to have a cause. The universe, exists, so it had to have a cause. Therefore, God. So the problem with that is if everything had to have a cause, you go into an infinite regression problem where you then have to ask, what caused God? Because according to this person's earlier logic, causes have to be bigger and oomphier than the thing that they have, the effect. So if God exists, then God has to have a bigger super God, that created him. And then you have super duper God, like one rank, and like super duper ooper God, and it just keeps going, and it's turtles all the way down, right? For those who get that. But yeah, some people can't have it both ways. You don't get to say everything has to have a cause and then say God and not answer the question, what was God's cause? Because if God can be an uncaused item, then you have no logical standing to say the universe couldn't also be an uncaused item. The whole argument falls apart right here, even if we had none of the other trash trying to support it. As soon as you go with that everything caused blah, blah, blah thing, you get what caused God, and then they end up scratching their head and going, no, it doesn't apply to God, which is a logical fallacy called special pleading, where you go, oh, my argument applies to everything except this one thing that I need it not to apply to because it would, as in liar, liar, because it's devastating to my case, So no, you just no. Anyway, yeah, please continue.
Of course, one philosopher tried to disguise that special pleading by saying, "Oh, there's two kinds of things. There's necessary things and contingent things, and contingent things have to have a cause, but necessary things, of which God is supposedly the only thing,
Yeah,
don't have to have a-
conveniently the only thing that's necessary. Yeah.
But the thing is, how do you determine what is contingent and what is necessary?
And well, let's take it from the other side. How do you decide that your particular preferred god is the necessary thing, as opposed to space aliens that did all this, or Zoroaster, or Matt Dillahunty's universe farting pixies? Like, how do you get from that leap of crazy to, and the only one it could possibly be is my preferred version?
Of course, I think we all know that the only necessary thing is the flying spaghetti monster.
Of course. Everybody get your pirate costumes. It's important.
Oh yes, we better do. How
Like a
dare
pirate.
I forget my eye patch?
Yes, and the colander on your head for your driver's license photo.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So let's go on.
All right.
So what are we left with?
Can't wait to
left
know.
with the fact that the universe had a beginning, and it was not a natural cause. It was something above nature. It was something super nature. Something supernatural.
I never really watched that show. I never really watched that.
Does God have a big S on his chest now because he's supernatural?
Oh,
Does he have a cape?
I did watch Superman, but I thought you meant there was supposedly a TV show called Supernatural.
There was, yes.
That seems to be most famous for having been a big queer baiting show.
I don't know. I watched some of it, but there was a lot of slash fiction written about the two main characters in that show. A lot. So there was definitely a lot of gay themes in it, and there were LGBTQ characters, and but
never actually
can't claim to have
confirming
watched
it.
all of it.
Hinting that a lot of LGBTQ characters, but not actually supposedly confirming it on the screen.
I can't say for sure because I haven't watched every episode, but I don't remember seeing it confirmed.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I've never got into that show, so I really wouldn't know. So,
but anyway, I love how he's like, we're left with the fact, as if he's proven anything so far. But sure, let's see where he goes with this.
Yeah, there's a whole. I could go way off topic, so let's get back on topic.
Okay.
It's pretty clear that this guy's talking out of his last name.
Yes, absolutely.
And so when we see the material effect of the universe, we can know that there was a supernatural creator that caused the universe.
No. Okay. The universe is not a material effect. We can't know that there's a supernatural creator that caused it. None of the conclusions he's positing come from any of the premises he's put forth. Nothing he said is evidence. No conclusion is supported that even looks anything like what he's saying. No. And by the way, I love how he goes from what created the universe to creator of the universe. Because now it's not just a what, it's a who. So we've made that leap without any evidence as well. So he's shoehorning in personhood for a deity now, instead of just having it be some arbitrary supernatural cause. Now it's one dude. It's not creators, it's creator. So we're just going right past the polytheistic things, right to monotheism, and just like leaping to the end with no.
Well, we know it's a flying spaghetti monster.
Yes, exactly. He even kind of looks like a meatball.
Anyway, I'm sure that's
whatever.
all he has in his head.
Yeah. I love how he's always like, it's a fact, and we know. Okay.
The universe. Proof number 2. Design demands a designer.
Now we're going to get
truism.
the watchmaker thing.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
The intelligent design thing. Let's see what he says about design.
It is a truism that everybody recognizes that this universe looks designed. In fact, when we see...
Let's pause there. Number 1, nothing you have said is a truism that everybody recognizes. That's just some crap you're spouting. But the universe is pure effing chaos. It does not look designed at all. Look at the picture you've just put up there of that nebula. That is not nice, neat rows and columns or something. It just, like, no pattern. It's not like some giant, like, look, there's a design. It's in perfect squares. No. And stop telling us that we agree with you before you've, established anything. Frustrating.
The various different aspects of nature, and we see birds and squirrels and trees, and we see all of the things that they do so well. Many times we as humans, we try to copy and mimic that design, but also
so I guess when you go to work, or when you go to get your groceries, you drive a crunk car to get them, right?
And you flap your arms real hard because you saw a bird once. Yeah, no. So
just for those anyone in the audience who's not familiar with it, a crunk car is something that it features briefly in the Dr. Seuss book, Marvin K. Mooney, Will You Please Go Now? And it is basically a really tall vehicle that instead of having wheels, it has giant legs.
Yeah.
Which is what with the exception of snails and slugs, it's what pretty much every terrestrial animal uses for locomotion.
Yeah.
And snails and slugs, they don't have wheels either.
Yeah. I also gotta say, he's like, oh, and these things in nature that do all these things so well. Have you ever seen a pelican? Like, do you know how most pelicans die? I'm just throwing this out there. Do you know how most pelicans die?
How?
They slam their heads into the water, scooping fish out their whole lives to the point where they inflict brain damage on themselves and they can no longer see straight enough to get fish, so they starve to death. And that's what this person is saying is just the most brilliant design in the whole universe, that nature does this stuff so well. These birds literally smack their own brains into brain trauma and starve to death because they can no longer fish. And somehow that strikes this guy, whichever direction I have to be pointing, look at the screen, as wonderful design that, is so amazing.
Try.
Also, if you go back here and you see here the kingfisher on the left and the bullet train on the right, if you've never
I've never seen a bird on rails before.
No, the thing is, if you've never seen, he's saying the things of nature look like they're designed. If you had never before seen a kingfisher and never before seen a bullet train, would you know which one of those is from nature and which one of them is synthetic?
And that's one of the great big problems with the watchmaker bit. The basic premise of it goes, you're walking through the forest, you see rocks and trees and everything, and then suddenly, boom, there's a pocket watch on the ground, and you recognize it as designed. And that means, you know it's designed, so it must have had a designer, blah, 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 blah. But what they always leave out when they're telling that story is, the reason we know it's designed is because we're comparing it to other mechanical things we've seen. We know already that machines are built by human beings. As you know, I wrote some notes before this, which you may not have gone over, but what I said about this is you don't compare the watch to a friggin' platypus to determine that it's designed. You You compare it to what you know. You could literally go to a watchmaker's factory and see them being built. You cannot go to the local Kingfisher factory and watch them assembling the wings. Like, it doesn't work that way. So, yeah, the whole watchmaker thing is this sort of sleight of hand where they try to take something you know to be true, which is machines are built, and apply it to everything that says, like, somewhere there's an animal factory. Like, it falls apart when you actually carry it through, and they're just hoping you won't notice that part.
Some years ago, I was walking in the mall and I saw a Build-A-Bear factory.
Oh, well, that proves everything. Holy cow! Let's all convert now. Do they have little? Do they have little, like, religious symbology around the bears? I'm curious. Was there a Pope bear? Did it have a funny hat? But yeah, no, it's the whole watchmaker thing is ridiculous.
Yeah,
because
he had a funny hat with he had a funny hat with a blue dot signed mitre.
Wow. All right, where does this guy go next? Aside from comparing birds to trains, what else do we have here?
To copy and mimic that design, but often we don't do nearly as well as the design that we see in nature. We look at the design of the human
I need to stop that there. We don't do as well as design. Show me a bird that can fly at Mach 2. Show me any animal that can see with the acuity of the Hubble telescope, and then get back to me about how we can't build anything better than what we find in nature, especially since, objectively speaking, nature is garbage. It's full of superfluous crap. Like, why does our ecosystem require frickin' mosquitoes that show up and, like, suck blood? Like, why is that part? If assuming there's a design, why would you build something this needlessly complex when, if you're an powerful deity, you could just be like, poof, and have a nice, streamlined, simple, straightforward system where everything would work functionally, perfectly, zero defects, no malfunctions, no mutations, no nothing. But that's not what we see in nature. That is not what we see in nature.
I think that in the God Delusion, Richard Dawkins mentions a certain nerve that goes down the neck, up the neck, and back down the neck. And even giraffes have it.
Yep. It's like a 45-foot long nerve in a giraffe because the neck.
He didn't say whether sauropod dinosaurs had it.
Ugh.
But I wonder if that's because nobody was able to examine a sauropod
not
dinosaur.
A lot of soft tissue preservation from the dinosaur eras. But yeah, it's Dawkins's book was fantastic. I recommended it for reading, even if you're a person of faith, because there's a lot of scientific insight in that. And I know you're like, I don't care, blah, blah. But when you're a person of faith and you try to present arguments in favor of your case that are so obviously wrong, right? It makes you look bad. Like, learn a little bit of science so maybe you'll think of some new approaches to this stuff, because the same, like, you watch 100 videos of apologetics and you're going to hear watchmaker, you're going to hear, something from nothing. You're going to hear the same stuff that only demonstrates the scientific illiteracy of the apologist saying it. So save yourself that embarrassment. Read some of these books that explain these things so you understand why you shouldn't make those arguments. That's all I'm saying.
A lot of apologetics seems like it's refined not so much to actually convince the unconvinced, but to entrench those who already hold their views.
I agree with you on that. The only place I'm going to gently push back is they come after people like us with it a lot. Like, they're convinced that they're going to be able to make an impact on people who are not of their faith with this stuff. Otherwise, they'd just be talking to each other. Like, we wouldn't hear these arguments if they weren't thrown at people like us. So there are people out there who make apologetics arguments specifically to throw them in our direction. And they legitimately believe they're making a solid case. So I would save them the embarrassment and save them the wasted time and energy of making cases we've heard a zillion times before that are no better now than the first time we've heard them. You're not treading new ground. You're not, walking a new path. This is all repeats of bad scripting.
But then there's the presuppositionalist apologists who believe that we already know deep down, because it's written in our hearts, that their exact version of God exists, and that we're supposedly suppressing it because we just want to sin.
Yeah, that's a real convenient excuse, when the much more likely thing is the story's full of crap and we're just not buying what you're selling.
Yeah, but the thing is, if someone comes after me with that argument, I kind of have insider information as to what I do and don't.
Yeah, exactly.
No, there's no way that argument is going to convince an atheist of the...
True. And here's something I actually use as a response to that. I say to them, you already know that that's garbage as an argument. Like, I can presuppose it's garbage. And here's how I can prove it to you. Because you would reject that same exact argument coming from anybody of a competing faith. You would immediately understand why that's just bonkers as a thing to say to somebody, because you would reject it when hearing it from anybody else.
The thing is about religious people is they always believe their faith is the one true faith.
Yeah, and so would somebody who throws that argument at them. A Muslim throwing that argument with them would be just as convinced as they are.
No, they believe that the Muslim deep down inside knows that the Christian God is real.
And the Muslim person believes the Christian knows deep down inside that Allah is the one true. So a little anecdote for you. Years and years ago, when I had more hair and it wasn't quite so gray, I was taking a business law class at a university in New Hampshire, and it was a virtual class that had a lot of most of the class was conducted via message boards, right? And there, by pure happenstance, was a ragingly evangelical Christian in there and a ragingly evangelical Muslim in there. And I loved setting the two of them at each other's throats. When one of them would come at me, when the Christian would do the presuppositionalist thing, I would immediately go to the Muslim woman and say, hey, what do you think about this that Bob said, right? And just, it's like a cartoon where the cats are fighting, a little ball of smoke with the paws shooting out, and and it was hilarious because you have two people who are equally convinced of competing views with no evidence for any of it, who will, die on that hill, literally throwing the same arguments at each other and not making the mental leap that the reason it's not working is because they're both wrong. Like they're completely convinced I'm the right one and you're wrong. And it just doesn't dawn on them. Both of them are in the same boat. So yeah, that was my entertainment during that business law class, was setting these two, against each other like cartoon cats. So, yeah.
But the thing is, often though, these religious people cannot see comparisons between them and other religions as valid because of their conviction that they're like for instance, a church that rings its bells so loud as to disturb the peace of people within miles. They know that they wouldn't feel comfortable if a mosque were to do the same thing.
Yeah, if they were doing the call to prayer at the same volume 5 times a day, they'd freak out.
Yeah, but thing is, because they're convinced that they're the one true faith, they don't see how this should kick in the golden rule and maybe mark their church service times in a way that affects only people who are interested in it.
You know what they ought to? I'm going to say this to you, then I got something for the audience. What they ought to do is have like a cross-shaped bat signal. Like shine its
I guess is that to summon Larry Boy? To summon Larry Boy? No, because a Christian version of Batman. I mean,
exactly. Bat God. Yeah, or is it super God? Yeah. So to the audience, Sophia was talking earlier about how dangerous a lot of these views can be, especially when religious people legislate their beliefs into civic law. Okay. Like just knocking a giant hole in that wall of separation between church and state, like the freaking Kool-Aid man with a religious symbol on. Okay. And that's dangerous because when you are convinced that whatever motivates you, whether it's, thinking that people of a certain complexion should be dangled from ropes from trees, or that trans people should be, what was the word that politician used, eradicated recently? Like, if you believe that instruction is coming from the single most powerful being in the cosmos, it overrides any sense of common sense, humanity, decency, anything, and you would do horrific crap. You look in the Christian Bible, and Abraham is celebrated for literally being willing to murder his child because he believed a deity told him to do it. If that's an example of what Christian belief tells you, that you should be ready to murder your own child, how much mercy do you think these people would give to anybody if they're willing to stab their own children to death and then light them on fire so the scent of burning flesh will please the Lord? Okay. So this is dangerous stuff. To all you people who are moderate Christians, you are the shield behind which the nutcases hide. Okay. Your insistence that this stuff is acceptable, laudable, noble, should be protected, that we should never change the First Amendment, the freedom of religion is the most important thing. You are the barrier between humanity and these psychos ever being taken away from being able to affect the human race. Okay? You are complicit. Every time you say you can't question people's religious beliefs, you put yourself on a footing where you cannot question somebody who says, for religious reasons, I'm going to wear an entire three-piece suit made of sticks of dynamite and run into somebody's mall. Okay? You lose the right to say that's wrong when you say that we must respect religion. So please don't let yourself be the shield behind which insane, violent zealots hide.
The thing is, the First Amendment that protects the freedom of religion, it also has this other thing in it called freedom of speech that protects our right to criticize religion.
Yes. And so don't get all up in our grill when we say stuff like this, because when you guys were in charge, you literally slaughtered people like us. So don't whine when we flap our gums a little. We're not stringing you guys up. We're not sawing you people in half or burning you with a stake. Okay? We don't want to do that because we're not you. Okay? So don't give us guff for speaking about these horrible things when, if you had the chance, your belief would be so powerful that it would literally end the lives of millions of people, like it has done throughout all of history, and not just people of other religions, but slaughtering each other over which way to be your particular religion. Look at Ireland. Those were people putting Black & Decker drills to each other's kneecaps because they couldn't agree on how to worship Jesus the right way. Okay.
And one more thing, and one more thing is just to remind everybody: if I understand if you don't have the spare money, but if you do, please visit Alfred's GoFundMe, which is again linked in the video description area. Visit his GoFundMe, and if you have the spare money, and help him get out of the South, because that could save his life.
Sophia's not kidding. And you don't have to take our word for this. You can go to the FBI's website and you can get their yearly report on crime statistics. Trans people are one of the top 3 most targeted for violence demographics in the country. Okay. And nowhere more so than in the Bible Belt south of the United States. So you said the guy's name is Alfred?
Yeah.
If Alfred lives in the South, Alfred is literally in jeopardy of injury or death every single day. So if you can contribute even a little that would get him out of there to someplace safer, I hope that you will consider doing it. It's important. It could literally be a life-saving donation.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's get
So-
back to Mr. Velcro and plant life here and see where he goes next. Because we kind of went off on a tangent there. Important tangent, but tangent. So let's get back to the video.
Sure. We look at the design of the human body and the human hand and the arm and the leg and the brain, and we see that those are some of the most advanced, technologically savvy pieces of equipment ever put together, and we try to mimic them and copy them.
Human bodies are not equipment. We are animals. We are part of the great ape family. As far as us being such advanced stuff, human brains cannot do 3 trillion teraflop calculations a second, but computers can. As far as us being so advanced, explain to me why we still have an appendix if we're so amazingly intelligently designed. Explain why our bodies age and fail and die. Explain why, in order to live, we have to put stuff in here that comes out in horrific evil form somewhere else a couple of hours later. Like, how is that an intelligent design? That is horrible. We are energy inefficient. We fail easily. We are fragile. There are animals other than human that do virtually everything better than us except for cognition. And there are some animals that probably do it better, like large whales that have brains the size of a Volkswagen. Okay. We are weak. We do not have coats of fur to keep us warm. We have no natural weaponry like claws, teeth, stingers with venom. We have none of that stuff. The only things we have that allowed this species to get along as far as it has are these opposable thumbs and an ability to think in order to build tools, going back to the whole watchmaker thing, stuff that we actually know is built as opposed to assuming that a bird is made in a factory. The human body is not some miraculously amazing thing that's perfect in every way. It's astounding that we did not end up with our species going extinct as saber-toothed tiger food 50 or 100,000 years ago. It's just amazing that we got as far as we did, because in competition with other animals, we lose in almost every category.
The main physical strength of humans is that our body is specialized as a persistence predator, which of course can't work without cognition, because persistence predator has to be able to continue following their prey when their prey's gone out of sight. So we obviously need, but also there's a lot of animals that can outrun us over short distances. There's not as many animals that can keep on doing it for long.
Yes. But even so, if we didn't have the opposable thumb with which to hold sharp, pointy things, you could chase a deer down and it would just gore you to death with its antlers. We can catch the animals, but we're not well equipped naturally to turn them into steaks. That's not how that works. And as among the great ape family, we're not even all that great. Your average gorilla can bench press like 400, 500 pounds without having to exercise and work out in a gym to do it. They're just built that way. Your average chimpanzee is only like this big, and it can out arm wrestle your average weightlifter because their muscle density is 8 times higher per unit of mass than humans. So we're not great. We don't see as well as hawks. We don't smell or hear as well as dogs. We don't run as fast as horses. Our chief advantage is heat dissipation that allows us to, as you said, be persistent predators that can follow injured or wounded prey until it's out of energy, and we can finish it off at close range with a spear or a stick. Okay? Which, by the way, is one of the reasons that I poke fun at hunters who are like, oh, I made this great shot at 600 yards. Like, you want to impress me about killing a bear? Do it with a baseball bat. Then I'll think you're an amazing hunter. Like when you have a cannon with the Hubble telescope on top, that's not hunting. That's you like shooting a missile from orbit. But yeah, so I digress. But yeah, the human body is loaded with redundancies. Joints wear out. That's why we have things like artificial hips and replacement knees and things like that. Our heart valves fail. We have heart attacks. The food we eat eventually kills us by imparting chemicals to our body that eventually cause harm over long periods of time. We get energy by having an acid bucket in the middle of our abdomen. Like this is not genius design if there was a designer. In fact, I'd want a freaking refund if this was the best work an omnipotent being could produce. So, I mean, like, why are we not just giant balls of energy that can roam the cosmos at will with no need for food, water, sleep, aging doesn't, like, why aren't we like that? You know? But this thing with the hair that, you know, with that starts to grow out of your ears when you get older and turns gray and falls out and, you know, grows on your elbows and junk like that. That's brilliant design. That's what somebody thinks is intelligent design.
What they'll say is but it's God's purpose. God works in mysterious ways.
Well, yeah, okay. We're made in God's image. Great. Does God poop? You know, does God have a digestive tract? Does he eat things and then, you know, oh, in the name of the Holy Spirit, like, how does that work if we're made in God's image? Like, does God have pubes? You know, these are things religious people don't think about. Like, saying we're made in God's image is just pure narcissism by whoever wrote that book. We're so awesome. We're made the image of the most powerful. I have the power. You know, narcissism up to here. You know, like we're great because we're modeled after the most perfect being in the universe. Fantastic. Does he sweat in his armpits? You know, like, let me know about that. So, you know, does he have to every day? You know, gets up, showers, shaves, brushes teeth. You know. Did God have baby teeth? Did they fall out at some point? Where did they go? You know. So yeah, it's this is not brilliant assemblage if it were actually a machine created by a deity. So anyway, enough of me rambling about it. I could go on and on about that because of how crazy that whole thought is, but I will rein myself in a little for time purposes.
Let's go on.
Yeah.
Logically savvy pieces of equipment ever put together, and we try to mimic them and copy them, and we can't do it as well. Why? Because this universe exhibits design from the starry sky at night to the fingertips on your hand. The design is overwhelming. It's everywhere.
No.
Where does design originate?
No. Can we pause here for a second? Since he was crazy enough to bring up the stars in the sky thing, which goes back to the creation story in Genesis, of which there are two, by the way, but we're going to start with the first one. If you take a look at the order in which things happened, not possible in any way, shape, or form, because it says God creates light and separates the night from the day, doesn't create stars until later. Where does the light on this planet come from? It's not a giant flashlight in the sky. It's a star. The stars didn't get made until what, day 5, day 6, something like that. So how do you have a day?
I don't think the Bible acknowledges that the sun is a star.
Yeah, and then of course, if you actually look, plants were put on, you know, according to the Bible, were created before stars were. So you have plants with no sunlight to sustain them. So, you know, the whole creation story is bonkers. So when this person starts talking about, oh, stars in the sky, go back and read the first 31 chapters of Genesis, which is the original creation story, and ask yourself how that order of stuff makes any sense at all.
Well, what you and I both know is that when you see
things we do not both know. Sorry. Oh, I hate when he does that.
Well,
maybe he's a presuppositionalist. He ultimately thinks that we know.
He's a D-bag. We both know. We both know you haven't proven squat yet, is what we both know. But continue, sir.
You and I both know is that when you see things that function and they're complex, that design comes from an intelligent designer. No. Big explosions just simply don't.
Again, not an explosion. And yes, complex things come from simpler things all the time. Leaving evolution out of it, because I know that's the one thing religious people lose their stack over. We just talked earlier about like computers being able to do mathematical computations we can't. Obviously, we have less computational ability than a Cray computer, but we built it. You know, we can't move through the air at 600 miles an hour, but we built something that does. So the whole idea that complex things can't come from something less complex is wrong. It's just wrong.
There's an Asimov story in the book I, Robot about a robot who refused to believe that it was built by humans because humans did not have all those computational abilities that a robot has.
So I've read the book, and I'm going to talk up Isaac Asimov for just a second for the readers here. Isaac Asimov wrote a lot of stuff. He was a brilliant scientist, astrophysicist, a bunch of brain power between his ears. But his robot books basically examined the human condition, but used robots as stand-ins for people so that you could talk about complex issues without pissing people off, making them feel like they were targeted. Okay. The book I, Robot is a compilation of 8 or 9 short stories that are absolutely amazing and has precisely nothing to do with that garbage Will Smith movie. So put the movie aside. The book is significantly better. I, Robot is the beginning of the whole thing. You've got the R. Daniil All of Us stories, which are detective stories with a human with a robot partner. You've got the Caves of Steel, Robots of Dawn. And then if you want to get into human, behavior on the macro scale, the Foundation series, all of it, brilliant writing, very enjoyable. You will not be disappointed if you read it.
Let's go on because we're like not even halfway through.
Yeah, I know. You got to stop every sentence for this guy. All right.
Bring about order. They don't cause things that are functional and complex to come into existence.
Okay, I agree with him on this one point. Explosions do not make functional, complex things. They make smithereens. But that doesn't justify anything else he's had to say.
Okay.
Demands a supernatural, intelligent designer.
So the fact that we've made airplanes makes us supernatural, intelligent designers? Wow!
Yeah, we're a supernatural. Let's go on.
Intelligent designer. Proof number 3. Life demands a supernatural life giver.
If I had hair, I'd be pulling it out right now. Well, let's let him ramble for a minute here.
Life giver. You see, in the material world, we have come to understand that there is a law of biology called the law of biogenesis. Law of biogenesis simply says
he's drifting hardcore into propaganda now. This is probably the 3rd or 4th time we've heard him use phrasing like, we agree that, we know that, it is fact that, we understand that. Like, already assuming you're on his side and agree with everything he's saying. When somebody does that, it's a propaganda move. It's just designed to try to make you overlook the flaws and whatever else they're saying by assuming you already agree. And this law of biogenesis thing, not a law in anything other than religious, apologetics, because we don't know how life came to be, and anybody who claims to know is making stuff up out of whole cloth.
Okay.
That in this material, natural world, life comes from previously existing life of its own kind.
Okay.
What the frell is a kind?
Kind is not a scientific word. That is just something out of Genesis in those first 31 chapters where it says, and this animal will produce according to its kind. Blah. Kind is not a scientific word. It is not a substitute for the word species. It is not a substitute for the word genus or any of that stuff. It is this made up crap that apologetics people use to try to act like they're being scientific while using, words that don't mean anything.
Now, when we look at how people used to think about life, they said, no, life can arise spontaneously from non-living chemicals. And yet every single biological experiment has shown us that that simply is biologically impossible. Life doesn't arise from
there? Number one, we have no evidence that that cannot happen. We simply haven't done it yet. And it might still be possible. We don't know conclusively it cannot be done. Secondly, other experiments failing does not mean your experiment succeeded. Okay, so the fact that you put some pictures of some scientists putting something from a big eyedropper into a plant pot does not mean that your competing hypothesis is somehow true. Okay, like you could have 1,000 studies that fail, and that doesn't mean the 1,001st one happens to automatically be true. So don't fall for that line of propaganda.
Also, there was an experiment which duplicated the conditions on Earth at the cusp between the Hadean and the Archean periods, and they found that amino acids did form, and they did form combinations, just none of the combinations were viable combinations. But here's the thing is, the conditions on Earth were like that probably for millions of years, over not necessarily over the entire Earth, but over an area that is much larger than that little lab, and they had million years. And you know how many times it would have to come into a viable combination for the rest to be prehistory? Only once.
Exactly.
In millions of years over it. It's unsurprising that none of the combinations formed in that experiment were viable. What is more significant is that certain combinations did form, and then it's just a probability over enough time and area. It's just a probability game and numbers game that eventually one will be viable.
And just to elaborate on that a little bit for any viewer that's having a hard time grasping that, imagine 1 square inch of some surface. The number of molecules of RNA that could be there, struggling to become a protein, is literally in the millions. Like, they're so small that you can have millions of them in 1 square inch of a surface, coating it. Imagine that on, covering a landmass the size of Africa, with all those reactions happening for millions of years straight. They're just, the number of repetitions gave rise to some successes. That's it. It's
maybe
not
only been one
complex
success.
to understand. As you said, it's a numbers game, and it was happening, millions of times per square inch times millions of square inches of surface of the Earth, however much of it was, covered, and over millions of years. The numbers are enormous. So, eventually it worked. It's like throwing a football through a very small circle at 25 yards or whatever. You may have no talent for it, but you do it enough times and eventually it's going to go through the stupid hole. Anyway, so sorry, I'm rambling. You got to shut me up when I talk too much.
Yeah, we're saying is good stuff. It's just that we want to get through the whole.
Yeah, you can edit out excessive crap.
Yeah.
Life can arise spontaneously from non-living chemicals. And yet every single biological experiment has shown us that simply is biologically impossible. Life doesn't arise from non-living chemicals. From where did life arise? Where did life originate if it doesn't arise from non-living chemicals? You see, the idea that there's no God suggests to us that there had to be some singularity without a cause that exploded, and that explosion brought about design, which we've never, ever seen happen.
Can you pause for a second? I got a short one for clarification for the viewers. Atheism is simply the lack of belief in a God or gods. It does not mention anything about evolution, the Big Bang, cosmology. It is simply the lack of belief in that, the same way not believing in Santa Claus says nothing about whether or not you think evolution happened or whatnot. This guy saying, if you're an atheist, you blah, blah, must believe X. No. All atheism is not believing in a God or gods. It has nothing to do with whatever he's trying to tack onto it.
Yeah, and people who say atheism is a religion, no. Atheism is the spectrum that includes every religion that does not involve a god or gods, and also includes the absence of religion.
Yes.
ultimately, somewhere the non-living chemicals gave rise to life, but that's biologically impossible. Life
Not necessarily.
demands.
Stop saying things demand a supernatural creator. This is
Do
all
we have a
God of the
petition
gaps.
for a thing?
I don't get
saying-
how life could have arisen without a God, therefore God. He's showing a distinct lack of imagination and scientific knowledge.
As you said, God of the gaps.
Yes.
A supernatural creator. Proof number 4. Moral law demands a moral law giver.
God,
No.
If some things
No. So there are two kinds of laws in this realm: proscriptive and descriptive. Proscriptive laws are things like, I say you can't drive faster than 55 miles an hour on this road. It's a rule imposed by an outside force. Descriptive laws are, we have noticed that when you drop a bowling ball in a vacuum, it falls at this rate. So we're going to call this acceleration of 32 feet per second squared the law of gravity. Okay, that's a descriptive law. What he is trying to say is that moral law can only be proscriptive. It has to be imposed from the outside by other people, which, if true, would mean that before whatever his religion is came to being, people just murdered everything they saw. They had no idea it was wrong. They raped, they pillaged, they stole, they committed genocide, blah, 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 which is not true. Secondly, when you talk about a moral lawgiver, and by the way, I love the way they fucked up the font there where it looks like it says demands a moral lawgiver. Right? The little bit shy on the spacing there. But yeah, if you have these absolutist laws, which are the proscriptive ones, like thou shalt not lie, and I actually know somebody who's a Christian who refuses to lie under any circumstance, I said, the problem with your morals here is, if you were a German citizen in 1939 that had Jewish people hiding in your basement, and the SS troopers came to your door and said, "Are there any Jewish people in the house?" And you were like, "Yes," you have not done a moral thing by telling the truth. You have triggered a sequence that ends in murder. Okay? That is not moral. Absolutist morality is always, always bad. You cannot have a situation where absolute morality is good, because the universe isn't black and white. If you try to act like it is, your morals will fail.
Giver.
Amoral.
If some things are objectively morally right and other things are
Like
objectively morally wrong, then there must be a God.
Because
Now,
they
one
want you to
thing
kill
is-
people in the basement. Like,
There's no evidence that there is a such thing as objectively morally right and objectively morally wrong. There are things that are antithetical to everything I hold dear, and there are things that are consistent with everything I hold dear, and there are things that are endorsed by every moral code that I would care to be supportive of, and things which are decried by any moral code that I would care to be supportive of. But that doesn't mean that they are right or wrong based on any rubric that is built into the fabric of the universe.
correct. And there are two things that people need to keep in mind about this, okay? Number one, let's look at the thou shalt not commit murder thing. That only applies to people with whom you share the social contract. And I know that that's a weird thing to think about, but that is the entire reason why American people can say, oh yeah, bombing people in other countries, no problem. Because they look at that particular kind of murder as okay. They're not part of our society. We don't owe them the same benefits of people we have a social contract with here. But it's still murder, okay? If they bombed us, like on 9/11, we don't go, oh, no worries about it, man. we recognize that very justly as mass homicide. Okay, it's not okay just because we're the ones doing it. So there's a whole aspect to morals that is reflective of, do you share the social contract with people or not? That gets into complex questions like, if you're starving to death, is it okay for you to steal an apple? If your kid is starving to death, is it okay to steal an apple? How do we answer the trolley problem, if you're familiar with that? Which, for those who are uninitiated, basically there's a trolley going down the tracks. It's going to hit 5 people, but you're controlling a lever that can switch it to another track, but there's somebody tied to the tracks over there. So you have to decide, you're going to pull the lever knowing you will cause that one person to die, or you're going to do nothing and let things go along their own course. These are all moral questions that are not black and white things. What if the 5 people are all convicted child molesters and the person tied to the tracks is a neurosurgeon who's just got kidnapped on his way to save a kid's life? What if the one person is Adolf Hitler and the 5 other people are, people who work at the local food bank? So it's not this cut and dried thing as this speaker would have you believe with this. These are absolutely morally right and these are absolutely morally wrong things. The universe does not operate that way.
Now, one thing is, I will point out, there are things that seem to me like they are inherently objectively morally right, and things that seem to me like they are inherently objectively morally wrong. But that is because I am perceiving things with a human brain, a brain of a highly socialized species, of a member of a highly socialized species. It's not because it's inherently part of the fabric of the universe, but it's just part of the way our species evolved. Because in order to, a feature that is there in our species in order to encourage group cooperation.
Yes, and therefore likelihood of group survival. And even those things, though, get twisted by religious belief. Let's take a very big one here. Would you agree with me that forcing sex on a 9-year-old girl is morally wrong? Forcing sex on a 9-year-old girl. Would you agree that that's morally wrong?
Yes. According to my moral code and any moral code I care to be supportive of, it is morally wrong.
Okay. There are literally at least 1.2 billion people on the planet right now who disagree with you. And they're called
But
Muslims.
I do not care to be supportive of their moral code, though.
They're called Muslims. Their prophet married his wife Aisha when she was younger than that, but restrained himself until she was 9. Okay? That's actually part of their religion. And they think that was just okay because it was ordained by Allah. Okay? So things that you and I would find like worthy of a life of incarceration or worse are perfectly okay when you think the cosmic daddy said so. All right?
Let's go.
This is
let's
an example
go on
of how this stuff can be so dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see,
Anyway,
if we evolve.
Oh, by the way, again, speaking about how things the cosmic daddy says can be dangerous, I do need to again mention that this is also the reason why there are these terrible laws being passed in many religious states in the United States that are making life very dangerous for transgender people. So if you have the money, there's a link to it in the video description area of this video. Go to Alfred's GoFundMe page and help him, do what you can to help him escape from the South.
Yep. And 2 quick things. Number 1, if you're hearing a loud snoring sound coming from my side, that's my dog. I can't do much about that. And secondly, I can almost hear the Christians watching this going, well, thank goodness we're not like those horrible people that think that the 9-year-old being abused is okay. Your religion is not different than that. Right now, your religion is repealing laws that keep children from being forced to work. Your religion is putting laws in place that force sexually assaulted girls to carry their rapist's baby to term. Okay. Basically saying it's worse to protect this 10-year-old who had to cross a straight line from having to carry her rapist kid than it is for you to worry about the rape itself. Okay. You have Republicans like Judge Roy Moore, who was in national governance for years, despite being known to have been cruising malls for 14 and 15-year-old girls for decades. And his supporters were like, well, life was just different when he... That's the same thing that you hear from the Muslims. Life was different when, the prophet was walking here. It's either, you're going to be on board with like harming children is bad or you're not. And if your religion allows for it, you don't have a leg to stand on to condemn other religions for the same things. So don't think your snow is white and pure. It's just as covered in road slush as anybody else's. Anyway, let us continue.
Yeah. So and again, visit Alfred's GoFundMe page.
Yes, absolutely. Any amount is useful.
From primordial slime over multiplied millions of years. At what point did objective moral values arise? We don't
Never.
look at a dog and say that that dog objectively, morally violated some rule when he steals a bone from another dog. We don't
Irrelevant.
say, hey, he violated a objective moral
We are
value.
not
We just
dogs.
don't say that.
Ow! Ow!
Yeah, exactly. Or in my dog's case, snore. Yeah, we are not dogs. That whole thing, you can just ignore it.
But we
You hear the
do
snort?
say that humans can perpetrate things that are objectively morally wrong, that humans can be involved in things that are morally right. If that's
Except
true,
no, as soon as you put the word objective in there, no. Therefore, it is not true. Therefore, your claim that there must be a God has no foundation. Nope. Next.
One thing is that if
must be a God.
okay, one more thing is that if you cannot have objective morality without a God, how can you have objective morality with a God? How would it, does having a God change that? Because yes, if his religion is true, and I'm assuming that it's his version, even if his version of God exists, and his version of God gave all those commandments about how one ought to live, no shellfish, no mixed fabrics. Oh wait. That's
Damn you, Red
different...
Lobster.
Why should we listen to this God?
Here's another one to really throw a wrench in their gears. How is it objectively moral when the God you're talking about changes its mind in your own book? Like at one point, drowning the planet was fine, but now it's not.
What I mentioned, like the shellfish and the mixed fabrics.
Yeah.
But when I say why should we care what this God says, I'm not saying is why would it be in your self-interest to care what this God says. I mean, why would you be under any moral obligation to care? Because that's also a moral code, moral rule that has to come from somewhere, and without it, any commandments from a God are morally irrelevant.
And then we're getting back to the difference between proscriptive and descriptive laws. Either there's some kind of objective morality and we can just say, oh, we noticed that this is wrong, so we're going to describe it with a law that says thou shalt not kill. Or the law is proscriptive, in which case it comes from God. But if it's descriptive and we just notice it, we don't need a God to tell us. The God is irrelevant. If it's proscriptive, then whatever the God's whimsy is at that moment will dictate what's acceptable and what's moral. For example, stabbing your kid on an altar and lighting his corpse on fire. Completely moral in the Old Testament, maybe not so good today. So in that case, it's not objectively moral. It's whatever this capricious deity decides on this particular day.
Although I have heard a Reform rabbi give a sermon stating that actually Abraham had failed that test, and that she's claiming that the correct answer would have been, "You God, I'm not killing my child."
Yeah, Christopher Hitchens said the same thing. But again, if you believe in a God and it tells you to do something, the only possible answer is yes, sir. How high, sir? You know, so there that cannot be a failure on Abraham's part because he was literally following an instruction from God who commands obedience. So that rabbi is simply wrong.
I'm just mentioning that position exists.
Oh yeah, no, I get you. I'm just poking a hole in it. Anyway, so we got arrows and check marks here. Where else is he going? What are we on, 4 now?
If
My
that's
God.
true, there must be a God.
No.
Proof number 5: free will exists.
I assume that he's not referring to any of the compatibilist models of free will, but that he's referring to libertine free will.
Presumably, and unless he says something to contradict that, that's what I would go with.
And there is no evidence that either he is we know for fact, even without our having seen this video before, we know for fact that he either is referring to 3 possibilities. Either he's referring to libertine free will, or he's referring to one or more of the compatibilist models of free will, or he hasn't even given a thought to the distinction between the two.
Right. I'd go with option 3.
Yeah. Yeah. But option 3 basically means A, or number 1 or number 2, but that you haven't thought of it. And if he's referring to libertine free will, then no, there's no evidence that exists. And if he's referring to a compatibilist model of free will, then no, that doesn't prove any God.
Agreed on all counts. And there's interesting science going on right now that actually suggests we do not, in fact, have free will. Because when monitoring brain activity in an MRI, you can actually see that the portions of the brain that make decisions activate after the ones that cause us to act. So what seems to be the case, and more study is ongoing, so this is not conclusive yet, but this is where its direction seems to be going, is that we actually act somewhat autonomously based on the personality we have developed over our entire lifetime, and then add the justification of decision making after the fact, but our brains don't perceive it that way.
But anyways, any talk about whether we have talk about whether we have free will depends on our definition of free will.
Yes. But even if we go with the biblical version of it, even the biblical God doesn't really give a shit about free will. As you can see in Exodus, when he robs the Pharaoh of free will just so he can kick Egypt's ass 10 times in a row and then slaughter all their firstborn children. Because originally the Pharaoh wanted to let the Jewish people go. But it actually says God hardened his heart, which is taking away his free will. He reversed Pharaoh's decision for him just so that he could smack Egypt around and kill a lot of children. So, real pro-life there.
Yeah, I made some time ago an animated comedy sketch.
Oh no, I gotta see that later.
I'll send you the link. Do you think I should put that in the description area?
If you think people would enjoy it or that it's informative or funny, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I will definitely send you a link to it after the film, after we finish filming here.
All right. So yeah, we've already pretty much gotten rid of the idea that free will has anything to do with God giving it to us, but let's let him ramble his way through it.
The atheistic idea that there is no God is founded on the idea of materialism, the idea that this material world is all that there is, all that there was, and all that there ever will be.
No,
because
it's just the lack of belief in God or gods. Stop saying that.
You can believe in karma. You can believe in reincarnation. You can believe in any kind of woo there is, except for the idea of God and
Yes.
still be an atheist.
Atheism doesn't even say you can't believe in leprechauns, for Pete's sake. So just more, this guy trying to paint atheism as something that it isn't.
Yeah. You can believe in someone who believes in every kind of woo there is except for God or gods is still an atheist.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Atheism has to suggest that you as a person don't really have free will, that there is no being inside of your body or brain that is super matter. That
What? What? Can you show me a beaker full of supermatter, please?
Yeah, has there been any evidence that this super matter exists?
I got to tell you, with the amount of times this guy uses the word super, he must see a lot of capes in his universe.
It's like in the Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, where they talk about super science.
Yeah, super science. And, nuclear bombs and volcanoes from that other religion. Yeah. Anyway, yes, continue to tell us about supermatter.
really what's going on in your brain is just electrons bouncing around, and you're the product of those bounces, and you don't really make decisions on your own. It's just the physical laws and properties going on in your brain. If you are
Let's pause for a
watching this
second.
video,
First of all, nothing bounces around in your brain. Electrical impulses do move through your neural pathways, but they are not bouncing around. They are not rubber balls. Okay. Just as far as decisions being made in free will, we know for a fact that that is simply the function of that organ in your head. And we know this because you can disable someone's ability to make decisions and to have free will by simply inflicting brain trauma. It happens to boxers all the time. You get punched hard enough in the head, it rattles your brain around in there, and you're like, seeing little freaking Tweety birds over your head. The phrase for it is getting your bell rung. Okay. We know that when the brain does not function, neither do cognition, decisions, free will, any of that stuff. Consciousness. When the brain does not function, none of that happens. Nothing to do with supermatter. It's just an organ in your head. Supermatter
going on in your brain. If you are watching this video of your own volition, then the fact of the matter is,
I am watching this video because refuting idiot videos like this is what I do is not all of what I do on YouTube, but it is most of what I do on YouTube. And it is the entire, pretty much what is done on this show. It is called Tearing Down Terrible Videos Together. And putting together the show requires me to watch terrible videos. That's why I am watching this video.
If it was good, you'd call it watching Academy Award-winning cinema together.
Yeah,
it's also amusing.
Going on in your brain.
Yeah, I think there is a channel that does that actually comments on movies. There's probably a number of channels that comment on movies, but this isn't one of them.
If you are watching this video of your own volition, then the fact of the matter is there has to be a God that can account for.
How do you get to that conclusion? If you're eating pork tonight, there must be So here's what I have learned so far from this. This guy does not understand neurology, does not understand astronomy, does not understand cosmology, does not understand biology, does not understand logic, evidence, reason, or science, but is perfectly willing to talk authoritatively across all that stuff without having any foundation in any of it whatsoever. That's what I've learned so far. Not holding out much hope for proof number 6.
That free will that you as a person have, there has to be a God if there is free will. And proof number 6, human reasoning.
Oi.
You see, we reason on a regular basis. We
Really?
understand abstract.
He doesn't.
I would never have guessed.
He
Captain
doesn't.
Obvious strikes again.
He's just talking out of his last name.
Yeah, this is something. Okay, but please, sir, continue. I have a few brain cells that aren't dead yet.
We were products of blind chance, random processes over multiplied millions of years.
Exactly.
No, we are. There is random mutation, but then there is natural selection, and that means that the permutations of the previous version that are less successful get weeded out, and those that are more successful stay in order to
reproduce.
Be the basis of. And we were in a situation where, and for a while we were in situations where certain cognitive abilities improved our chance of survival. Period. Anything?
I mean, the list on the screen right now, yes, that's a lot of how evolution works. You know, with the exception, as you said, of natural selection, pretty much, you know, outlines the process. This slide is accurate if his voiceover was, here are some of the things that got, you know, us from amoeba size to this. And then, you know, add natural selection to the bottom of the list. You know, because we don't choose the mutations that happen in the genome. We don't choose, you know, like millions of years ago before cognition and choice were part of this, you know, who various animals mated with, you know, they weren't cognizant of where their evolutionary path would lead in the future. This is all part of it. But again, enormous progress can be made through these processes by small increments over enormous periods of time.
Okay, so let's go on.
Yes.
Reasoning and the laws of reasoning simply would have no explanation. And yet we reason together on a regular basis. From where does reason arise?
Your brain.
It's got no naturalistic, atheistic explanation.
Your brain.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Here we go. The deathbed conversion story. Here we go.
But the thing is, too bad he isn't using his.
Yeah, so as soon as you see Anthony Flew on the screen, you know he's going to do a deathbed conversion story because that's what Flew did. But yeah, let him explain it, and then we'll explain why his version of the story is wrong.
Explanation. Anthony Flew, the atheist who wrote Theology and Falsification, the most popular atheistic paper for the last 100 years, the last century. In 2006, he co-wrote a book titled There Is a God, How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Became a Believer. He stated that his rule of life had always been to follow the evidence where it leads. And he said he followed that evidence. And it led him to the conclusion that there is a supernatural, intelligent God. Let's let the evidence lead us to that same conclusion.
Okay, so on Anthony Flew, his conversion came very late in his life when his cognition was rapidly declining. Nothing in the book that he mentioned actually has any scientific justification for his conversion. This is just another, oh my gosh, I'm getting old, I'm scared of death, you know, story. It's not a science book. It's not, here's the chemical reason why we believe that there is super matter in your noggin that makes you able to make decisions. So,
in other words,
just discard any deathbed conversion stories. They're bunk.
In other words, you could say that he knew deep down inside that there was no evidence that there is a God, but he couldn't handle his impending death.
Yes. And, you know, I hear that from religious people a lot. They say things like, just wait until people you know start dying. How does that prove a deity exists? It just proves that shit's tragic. You know, then you're going to be sad. You know, like they think the weirdest stuff is evidence when it's not. So anyway, I think he's fading to blank screen here, thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah, it's
that name.
and I think this
Wow.
is a good place to end it, where we show
Yes.
his name and
Yep.
basically remind people that he's basically was talking out of his last
Yes.
name this entire
If you're
time.
going to be in this, you may as well go whole hog on it. You know? All right. So thank you for listening. And remember, go visit the GoFundMe. It's important. It's life-saving stuff.
Indeed. Anyways, thank you very much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah.
And also there's also the Discord and everything. And I think I'm going to there's also this channel also has its Discord and everything, and all these things are on my page of links, which is going to be visible. I'll put a link to my page of links in the video description area too. Well, have a nice day, and until next time, see ya.